The air in the kitchen of the Potomac mansion didn't smell like home. It smelled like expensive candles, Santal 26 or some other name that cost more than a week's worth of groceries. Underneath the scent of sandalwood was the sharp, acidic bite of Julian's espresso and the ghost of the cigarette Clarissa had just finished. Then, the world tilted. The slap wasn't like the movies. There was no dramatic music, just a wet thwack and the sudden, violent jarring of my neck. My glasses skittered across the marble island, landing somewhere near the 800 toaster. I didn't fall, but I felt my spirit stumble. "I told you," Julian said. His voice wasn't screaming. It was worse. It was the calm, bored tone of a man talking to a dog that wouldn't stop barking. "We don't do old school here, Ma. You don't tell Clarissa she can't smoke in her own breakfast nook. You don't get a vote." I tasted it then. The copper. The metallic tang of blood where my molar had sliced into the soft tissue of my cheek. I looked at him, really looked at him. This was the boy I'd carried through the humid heat of a Baltimore summer in 1978. This was the boy whose fevers I'd broken with cold rags while the landlord pounded on the door for rent I didn't have. "I have COPD, Julian," I whispered, the words catching on the fluid in my lungs. "The doctor said." "The doctor says a lot of things," Clarissa chimed in. She was leaning against the sub-zero fridge, her yoga set matching the cool grey of the walls. She didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed, like I was a spill she'd have to clean up later. "Maybe if you spent less time eavesdropping on our lives and more time staying in your suite, your lungs wouldn't be such a problem." Julian turned back to his laptop, dismissing me. The back of his head, the same head I used to stroke until he fell asleep, was now a wall of indifference. "Go clean yourself up, Ma," he said. "We're having the Mitchells over for cocktails at 7. Stay upstairs. I don't want you coughing all over the appetizers." I didn't say a word. I picked up my glasses, one lens was cracked, and walked toward the suite. It was a beautiful room, technically. Designers call it transitional. To me, it was a tomb with a high thread count. I sat on the edge of the bed and felt the heat in my cheek. It throbbed in time with my heart. I looked at the photograph on my nightstand, Julian at his MBA graduation. He was beaming, his arm draped over my shoulder, his expensive gown fluttering in the breeze. I had spent 17 years of my life at the Bethlehem steel mill to pay for that gown. I had scars on my forearms from molten splashes and lungs full of grit so he could have a finance life. I picked up my phone. My fingers were shaking, but my mind was a diamond hard and clear. I scrolled past Julian's name. Past Clarissa's. I went to a name I hadn't called in years. "Leo Vance," I whispered. 25 years ago, Leo was the scrawny kid from the neighborhood whose father had been killed in a hit-and-run. I'd fed him dinner every night for 3 years because his mother was too drunk to cook. I'd helped him apply for the scholarship that got him into law school. He answered on the third ring. Martha Higgins, is that you?" "Leo," I said, and my voice finally broke. "Leo, I'm in Maryland. And I need a shark. The ghost of the mill." To understand why I stayed for 6 months in that house of ice, you have to understand the Maryland mill towns of the 1980s. I married Big Jim Higgins when I was 19. He was a man made of muscle and bad habits. He worked the line at the steel mill, and when the shifts were over, he drank the line's frustrations away at the local VFW. He wasn't a mean man, just a hollow one. When he died of a massive coronary when Julian was 10, he left me with 3 things: a mortgage on a row house with rotting sills, a $5,000 life insurance policy that barely covered the funeral, and a son who looked exactly like him but had eyes that wanted the world. I went to work at the mill. I was one of the few women on the floor. I wore heavy leather boots and denim that felt like sandpaper. Every day, I stood in the roar of the machinery, the heat so intense it felt like it was melting the marrow in my bones. But I had the cans. I had Maxwell House coffee cans hidden in the crawl space behind the water heater. Every Friday, I'd take my paycheck. I'd pay the electric. I'd pay the mortgage. I'd buy the generic cereal and the bruised apples from the back of the grocer's. And then, I'd take $10, or $20, and I'd drop it into the can. That was Julian's SAT prep. That was Julian's first suit. That was the tuition for the University of Maryland that his partial scholarship didn't cover. I never told him. When he asked how we had money for his textbooks, I told him I'd won a small lottery. When he asked why I didn't buy a new car when the Ford started spitting blue smoke, I told him I liked the character of the old one. The truth was, I was breathing in the mill. Every shift was a deposit into his future and a withdrawal from my own life. By the time Julian graduated and got a job at a hedge fund in D.C., my lungs sounded like a bag of dry leaves being crushed. "You did it, Ma," he told me the day he moved into his first luxury apartment. "You can finally relax." But he didn't invite me to live with him then. He didn't offer to help with my medical bills when the cough turned into a diagnosis of stage 3 emphysema. He sent flowers on Mother's Day. He sent a gift basket with artisanal cheeses I couldn't chew on my birthday. I stayed in the row house until the stairs became a mountain I couldn't climb. When the landlord sold the building and gave me 30 days to leave, I called Julian. I remember the silence on the line. It was a cold, calculating silence. "I guess the guest suite is empty," he said finally, "but Ma, Clarissa is very particular about her space. You'd have to contribute." "Contribute?" I asked. "Julian, I'm on disability. It's $1,200 a month." "We were thinking $500 for household management," he said. "And you help with the cleaning. Clarissa hates the maid." I should have known then. A mother's heart is a stubborn thing, though. It filters out the red flags and sees only the toddler who once cried when he scraped his knee. I moved in. I brought my 2 suitcases, my nebulizer, and the photograph of a boy who no longer existed. The first 3 months were a slow erosion of my dignity. Clarissa didn't like the aesthetic of my oxygen tank. She made me keep it in the closet, even when I was gasping for air. She didn't like the smell of the ointments I used for my joints, so I stopped using them. Then came the fees. "The water bill went up, Martha," Clarissa said one Tuesday morning, tapping her French manicured nails on the counter. "You're taking 10-minute showers. We're going to need an extra 100 this month." "I have to steam my lungs, Clarissa," I explained. "It's the only way I can clear the fluid." "Buy a humidifier," she snapped. "But don't plug it into the guest room outlet. The electricity is already peaked." Julian watched these exchanges with a glazed look. He was always on his phone, always tracking margins and acquisitions. He had acquired a beautiful house, a beautiful wife, and a convenient servant he happened to be related to. I started documenting it. Not because I wanted to sue him, not yet, but because I felt like I was disappearing. I bought a small notebook at the CVS when I went to pick up my inhalers. October 12. Julian took $200 from my purse for valet tips because he was out of cash. Didn't pay it back. October 19. Clarissa threw away my homemade stew. Said it smelled like poverty. November 4. locked out of the house for 4 hours because they went to a gala and forgot I didn't have the new security code. The physical abuse didn't start with a slap. It started with a shove. I was in the kitchen, trying to make a cup of tea. Clarissa was rushing to get to a Pilates class. I was in her way, moving slowly with my cane. "Move it, Martha!" she barked. She pushed me. Not hard enough to knock me down, but hard enough that I hit the corner of the counter. My hip bruised instantly a deep, ugly purple. When I showed Julian that night, he didn't even look at the bruise. "You're clumsy, Ma," he said. "Maybe you're getting dementia. Maybe we need to look into a real facility." The threat was clear. They wanted my disability check, they wanted my cleaning services, but they wanted me to know I was one step away from a state-run nursing home where the hallways smelled of bleach and forgotten souls. That was the night I found the financial documents folder Julian had left on the printer. I'm an old mill worker, not a financial analyst, but I know how to read a ledger. Julian hadn't just been taking my $500 rent. He had used my social security number to open 3 credit cards. He had run up $15,000 in debt in my name to pay for Clarissa's designer handbags. He was using me as a tax write-off while simultaneously draining my credit score into the gutter. I felt a coldness settle in my chest that had nothing to do with the emphysema. I took photos of every page with my phone. I recorded Clarissa's voice when she told me I was a decrepit burden. And I waited. I waited for the moment when the last thread of my maternal love would snap. That moment came with the slap. When I called Leo Vance, he didn't just listen. He roared. "I'm sending a car, Martha. Tonight. When they go out." "No," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "If I leave, they LOL hide the evidence. They LOL say I'm senile. They LOL close the accounts. I need to stay until you're ready. I need to be here when the walls fall down." Leo was silent for a long time. "You always were the toughest woman in the ward, Mrs. Higgins." "Okay. I'm calling Sarah Jenkins, she's the best forensic accountant in the DC area. And I'm calling a friend at the Baltimore Sunday. This isn't just a lawsuit, Martha. This is an exorcism." For the next week, I played the part of the broken mother. I kept the bruised cheek visible. I didn't cover it with makeup. I let it turn from red to purple to a sickly yellow. I watched them. I watched Julian brag to his friends about his philanthropy while I served them drinks. I watched Clarissa smoke her expensive cigarettes while I coughed into a handkerchief in the corner. "Look at her," Clarissa whispered to a friend one night, thinking I couldn't hear. "She's like a Victorian ghost. Julian is a saint for not putting her in a home. She's completely lost it." I went to my room and opened my laptop. I had a new email from Sarah the accountant. "Martha, we found it. Julian didn't just use your credit. He took out a reverse mortgage on your old row house before the landlord bought it. He forged your signature on the power of attorney. He stole the equity you worked 30 years for. It's over $80,000. The equity. That was my retirement. That was the money I was going to use for the private nurse I knew I'd eventually need. He hadn't just slapped my face, he had stolen my very air." The next morning was a Friday. The day of the big reveal. Clarissa was in the kitchen, humming to herself. Julian was reading the Wall Street Journal. "Ma, where's my blue tie?" Julian yelled without looking up. "The silk one." "I don't know, Julian," I said, walking into the room. I wasn't carrying a tie. I was carrying my phone, and it was recording. Maybe Clarissa sold it to pay for the household expenses you keep charging me for. Julian looked up, his brow furrowing. Excuse me. I know about the 80,000, Julian, I said. My voice was like a bell, clear and resonant. I know about the credit cards. I know about the forged signature. Clarissa let out a sharp, mocking laugh. Oh, the senility is really kicking in now. Julian, call the doctor. We're doing the intake for the manor today. I'm done with this. I wouldn't call anyone just yet, I said. The doorbell rang. Not a polite chime, but a heavy, authoritative knock. Julian stood up, looking confused. Who is that? We're not expecting anyone until the caterers. He opened the door. Leo Vance stood there, 6'2" of pure legal fury, flanked by two men in suits and a woman with a high-end camera. Julian Patterson, Leo asked. Who are you? I'm Leo Vance. I'm your mother's attorney. And these gentlemen are from the Adult Protective Services and the State Police. Julian's face went the color of unbaked dough. This is a mistake. My mother is. Your mother is a victim of felony elder abuse, financial exploitation, and third-degree assault, Leo said, stepping into the foyer. He held up a tablet. We have the recordings. We have the forensic audit. And we have the photos of the handprint you left on her face 36 hours ago. The next 2 hours were a blur of justice. The APS investigator, a woman named Elena with eyes like flint, walked through the house. She took photos of my suite. She took photos of the mold Clarissa had refused to have cleaned in my bathroom. She interviewed the neighbors, who had heard Clarissa screaming at me on the patio. I didn't hit her. Julian screamed, his voice finally losing its cool. She fell. She's sold. The forensics of the bruise say otherwise, Mr. Patterson, the police officer said. Slap marks have a very specific capillary breakage pattern. They don't look like falls. Clarissa tried to slip away to the garage, but Sarah the accountant was already sitting at the kitchen table with a mountain of printed bank statements. Don't bother, Mrs. Patterson, Sarah said. We've already frozen the accounts. Every penny you spent on those Chanel bags came from a credit card opened in Martha's name. That's identity theft. That's a 10-year minimum. I sat in the middle of their perfect living room, on the white couch I was never allowed to touch. I felt light. The weight of the mill, the weight of the coffee cans, the weight of the secrets I'd kept for Julian, it all just evaporated. Ma, Julian said, dropping to his knees in front of me. His expensive suit was wrinkled. He looked like the 10-year-old boy again, the one who had cried over a scraped knee. Ma, please. We can fix this. I'll pay it back. I'll get Clarissa into counseling. Don't do this to me. It'll ruin my career. I'm up for a partner. I looked at him. I saw the man who had watched me cough until I bled and asked me to move so I wouldn't ruin the view. You ruined yourself, Julian, I said. I didn't have to do a thing but tell the truth. You were the one who taught me that margins are everything. Well, your margins are gone. As they led them out, Julian in handcuffs for the assault and the fraud, Clarissa screaming about her rights, the house went silent. Leo sat down next to me. You okay, Martha? I can breathe, Leo, I said. And for the first time in 10 years, it was true. 6 months later, I'm sitting on a porch. It's not a mansion in Potomac. It's a small, sun-drenched cottage in a quiet part of Annapolis. The air smells like salt and lavender. The settlement was massive. Leo didn't just get my 80,000 back, he took Julian for every cent of the equity in that mansion. He sued the hedge fund for Julian's bonuses, arguing they were derived from a man of unfit character. Julian is serving 3 years. Clarissa is serving 5. They lost the house, the cars, and the perfect teeth. But I didn't keep all the money. I started a foundation, the Coffee Can Project. We provide legal aid and emergency housing for elderly parents being exploited by their children. We have 6 lawyers on staff now. Leo is the chairman. Every month, we help a dozen Marthas find their voices. I have a nurse named David who comes by every day. He doesn't mind the smell of my ointments, he makes me tea and tells me about his kids. Yesterday, I got a letter from prison. It was from Julian. He said he was sorry. He said he finally understood what I'd sacrificed. I didn't open it. I didn't have to. I walked over to the small table in my foyer. There, sitting in a place of honor, was an old, rusted Maxwell House coffee can. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a $10 bill, and dropped it in. That was for me. I watched the Cardinals at the feeder for a while, the sun warm on my face. I'm 73 years old. My lungs are tired, and my heart has scars. But my house is my own. My name is my own. And for the first time in my life, I'm not just surviving. I'm living. What would you have done? Would you have stayed for the child you raised,